As chapter 5 begins, there is some confusion with the chronology. At the beginning of chapter 24, we noted that Abraham was on his deathbed, charging his servant with the task of finding Isaac a wife. Here at the beginning of chapter 25, we have some details about Abraham's second wife. This is simply the author of Genesis doing a sort of flashback to fill in some details, before going on in verses 7 to 11 to describe Abraham's death and burial. You will sometimes find in biblical narrative, even in the Gospels, that chronology is generally quite loose, and an author can hop around a bit. This is probably what is also happening in chapter 26, when Isaac, like his father, pretends his wife is his sister. The birth of their twins is related in the previous chapter, chapter 25. How then could they pretend to the people of Gerar that they were unmarried if they had twin boys? It makes sense that the author has narrated these episodes out of sequence. The last verses of chapter 26, which relates the marriages of Esau to two Hittite women, rejoins the narrative about the twins which paused at the end of chapter 25. The Abraham cycle started at the end of chapter 11 and finishes here at the beginning of chapter 25. The next cycle is not Isaac's, but Jacob's, which lasts from chapter 25 till the end of the book, even though from chapter 37 onwards the action focuses on Joseph, and is rightly known as the Joseph story. But here we come to the heart of Genesis, for this is the founder of Israel. In the New Testament, it is Abraham who is focused on more as the beginnings of faith, firstly because that is historically correct, but also because he represents both Israel and the Gentiles, whereas Jacob himself becomes Israel and is the father of the 12 tribes. In 25:21, we find that Rebekah was also barren, and they had to wait 20 years before the twins were born. The twins battled each other inside Rebekah, and Rebekah inquired of the Lord what this meant. We automatically assume that this means she simply prayed, but whenever we find this phrase inquired of the Lord, it means that the person has gone to see a priest or prophet to ask on their behalf. This is not another mechanistic oracle like Abraham's servant, because the answer was not yes or no. She may have gone to some sanctuary and asked a priest, as was the practice in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Alternatively, she could have gone to a holy place and hoped for a dream. We are not given the details, but the Lord does answer her and tells her that 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. As with Ishmael and Isaac, it is the second-born who is chosen and will have the supremacy, even though both will father nations. Paul discusses this choice in the famous passage in Romans 9, where he quotes from Malachi 1 verse 2. Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. This is a Semitic way of speaking and not to be taken literally. It means that God has chosen one over the other and has firmly committed to this choice. Once again, we see that God implacably unfolds his plan in the messy lives of both his servants and opponents. Names given at birth were believed to affect the child's destiny. The name might reflect a physical characteristic like Esau, or some behaviour like Jacob grabbing the heel. The names also were plays or puns on similar words. Jacob probably means may God protect, but this particular verb to protect has the same consonants as the noun heel. There is the idea here also of following hot on the heels, and the idea of deception or hampering or hindering. There is another ominous note when in verse 28 we read, Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. There is obvious favoritism here, which will bring trouble for years to come. The parents themselves will play a key role in the struggles which began in utero. The reference to Jacob dwelling among the tents possibly means that he was in charge of the shepherds and flocks. It may be that Esau, when out hunting, came across Jacob in a tent somewhere overseeing the flocks as they moved on to a new pasture. This would mean that their parents weren't there to help with the issue of food, but other witnesses would have been for the ridiculous transaction which took place. The inheritance would have been divided between all sons, but the firstborn would receive a double portion. Esau might only have given up this extra portion instead of the whole lot, but worse is yet to come. We see Jacob's quiet cunning here, exploiting what he knows of his brother's temperament, especially in its starved and exhausted state. Nevertheless, Esau is condemned for making such a foolish decision, and the author makes it clear that Esau did not value his birthright. The letter to the Hebrews holds up Esau as an example. See to it that no one becomes like Esau, an immoral and godless person who sold his birthright for a single meal. You know that later, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no chance to repent, even though he sought the blessing with tears. In chapter 26, God reaffirms the covenant he made with Abraham. Nevertheless, Isaac lives with the same struggles and temptations. Isaac is blessed when he grows crops, but his success is the cause of his banishment by Abimelech. Then we see him in numerous conflicts over dug wells, until finally he is able to settle in Beersheba, where he builds an altar to the Lord. Despite blessings from the Lord, the paths of the patriarchs is far from smooth, though sometimes that is of their own doing.